It's taken me some time to kind of share this, but one of the, I guess, two hardest things over that summer was one of them was opening the door and her not even knowing her own daughter. And that was really difficult, especially after I had spent so much time caring for her. And, her wheeling herself to the door and opening it up and saying, "Who are you?" And me having to sit there and say, "It's Caitlin, it's your own daughter," was heartbreaking, is really the best way I can describe it. The other incident that really tore me apart was I witnessed her trying to kill herself, and that was also a very difficult time in my life, all within that summer. So you can see why that particular summer was one that I never wanted to repeat ever again, and why the following summer was escapism.
Content creator at Habitat for Humanity, one of the world's largest nonprofits. She's also illustrated the Soulful Travels Journal for Travel Through Trauma. We are so grateful. It's been such a valuable tool for our clients. She's been awarded and published. She has been awarded and has published artwork in Arts to Hearts magazine, issue 11. Definitely go check it out. Her social media is Visual Vitality. This is a wonderful, beautiful, creative artist that I love so dearly. She and I met so randomly on Instagram through a shared page around having borderline personality disorder mothers. And I think it was such a beautiful start to our ever evolving, deep, beautiful friendship. And I'm very, very grateful to have you in my life. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. That was a great intro. And yeah, it reminds me of our how we first met and it was so crazy. I remember messaging you and like a weirdo stalker and I was like, "Hey, I saw you made this comment where like your mom has borderline and I also have a mom who has borderline." I was like, "If you ever wanna talk," and I messaged you on your personal, and then I found out that you had the Travel Through Trauma Instagram page, and then I messaged you there.
I'm so, so glad you did. It's like that single interaction has like changed a huge part of like my life trajectory because I was able to finally relate to somebody who had such a similar childhood, similar relationship to their wounded mother. And I think it's
Yeah,
extremely powerful when you can find someone who understands you at that level. You
I
have
know.
like this vocabulary to describe your childhood that I haven't even been able to talk about with people before. Very
Oh,
grateful to you. Yeah.
thank you.
What a fun start to our friendship, and the fact that we've only met one time since then, and yet I feel like I've known you forever. It's truly mind-boggling.
No, it's crazy, like, I really did when we met last year in person, I did have a moment where I was like, "Is she a real person?" It's like the gamer friends where they get to finally
Yeah,
meet.
I finally
And
get it.
yes. But it was really beautiful that we were able to connect, and, of course, like, our stories weren't the same, and, like, our moms were not the same, and we're not the same, but we were able to find this kind of, like, cornerstone piece for us to, like, launch our friendship, and we didn't take it as, like, a form of, like, um what's the word when people are, like, dependent on, like, their trauma, like, they trauma dump
Trauma
and that's like
bonding.
trauma bonding, thank you. Yeah, it wasn't a trauma bonding, it was like, "Let's find this shared connection, let's also share about our healing," and then it just kinda evolved from what's going on in your life, and we just continued staying in touch, and it has been so beautiful, and you have been such a blessing and so helpful as well, like, thank you so much for helping me with the corporate girly life that I'm still learning, and just so much more. You've been incredible person,
Guys, I have
you know.
learned so much from you. You have expanded my mind when it comes to art because I find that's something I don't have a natural affinity towards. And I love the way you talk about it. I love your passion for life and for just your creative expression and your authenticity. It just it's really, really amazing to see a woman who has had a similar upbringing, but take a very empowered path forward in their lives. And I know travel was a big portion of your life story as well, which is another thing that you and I connected on, among many other things that we connected on. So I can't
Mhm.
wait to go deep into that.
No, for sure, yeah, and just, like, seeing like we were talking about with art, I was telling someone, the other day that I see art as a conversation starter, and I truly believe and have experienced having some of the most meaningful conversations with people standing in front of an art piece that I would have never had those kind of conversations just, sitting on my day-to-day life or just going about my day in general.
Do you have an example?
I think, like, just analyzing, like, I've had times where, um, I would be sitting in front of an art piece, and my friends and I would sit there and kinda talk about what it means, and from that would branch into conversations of their story, their lives, experiences, and why they interpreted things that way, or why one hit closer to home more than another, and I think those were just so beautiful to talk about. I've even had moments where we've had difficult conversations, some art pieces are political, and we've been able to have these empathetic and heartfelt conversations in a space that was safe and was comfortable and not fueled with hatred or any kind of spite, and so that was a beautiful moment, and also I've had really awesome conversations about, contemporary art, which is one of my big passions and is commonly misunderstood, and I think contemporary art so deeply navigates what is going on in the mind and what is going on in the world around us, and I think that contemporary art creates conversations for that because it tells you in a visual sense what is going on in the world, and I think that's really impactful. It's history making, it's documentation, and again, those are conversations that we don't often have, and it makes it a little bit more approachable. So my goal in life is not just to make art, not just appreciate art, but to have conversations in the midst of art.
And how many places can we say are curated in that way to hold space for conversations that can be polarizing or can be difficult to have? And I think the way that you framed art as being that vessel to
Mhm.
allow that kind of movement, conversation, dialogue, I think shows the importance of art in today's society because I think it's becoming increasingly devalued in a lot of ways. I mean, even with like the writers' strikes that have happened in Hollywood, because like writing is a form of art, or even with like movies and music and how capitalism has diluted the
Mhm.
art behind it in a lot of ways. I think it's important that people like you are continuing to harness it for all the power that it can have and being able to share that with people. And even the art in the background of your room is just beautiful. It's made by you, and I wanna, like, look at it closer because I really wanna be able to experience the emotions that I'll feel from looking at it more closely. You'll have to give it to us when it's all done. Yeah,
Sure. I know. This is an in progress, a little sneak peek.
yeah.
It's been sitting here for a good bit, but I actually need to like redo some things. But it is really nice little backdrop and it is really interesting to look at with kind of this repeating pattern, which is my
Yeah, and it goes well with your shirt as well,
it
very
does.
complimentary. Yeah.
Which is
I love that. I wanna go more into your upbringing, your childhood, because you grew up in Tennessee, right? Your whole life, and
for the most part. Yeah.
for the
Well,
most part
I did live in Florida for a period of time.
mm, I don't know that. Always
Yeah.
learning something about you.
I lived, it was during my younger years when I remember going to school there in kindergarten, first grade, and part of second, and then moved back to Tennessee and then was raised in Tennessee for most of my life from there. But in Florida, that's when my parents split and my mom went to
Mm,
Florida. So, and
I
that's kind of
see.
what started the whole journey. Do you want me to jump in?
Do it. I wanna know it all.
Okay, so diving right in, my family, mom and dad, they got divorced. My mother, I still to this day don't actually know. I think she had some underlying mental health concerns. But it became very extreme after pregnancy, which is can happen, and it developed into, like, I think she had something. I don't really know because obviously I was so young, but all I know is after I was born, this woman had borderline, and it was severe, and it got worse and worse, mostly because it was untreated, unmedicated. She refused to believe that she had anything wrong with her, which is
And this
pretty.
was diagnosed?
This was diagnosed, yes. So we went to my dad went took her to 3 different psychiatrists. I think he took her to like a, or maybe like a, one was like a neuropsychiatrist, one was like a like a like a full-on psychiatrist, and just got a variety of input, and every single one of them was like, "Yes, this is either bipolar or borderline." Another one was like, "This is borderline." Another one was like, "This is borderline." So, pretty set that she had something wrong. Or I don't know, I guess I shouldn't say something wrong, but very clear that she had a mental health disorder. And I guess the wrong part was that she didn't take care of it. And she didn't own up to the fact that she needed help. And that was the wrong part. Not that you can't help that, but that was where it made it really difficult growing up, and kind of changed, honestly, I truly believe changed the trajectory of our entire lives. I think it would have been completely different if she just said, "I'm gonna take some medication." And I think that they probably would have been still together because my dad is a very kind and empathetic human being, and he's such a lovely human and just has so much love to give. And I see it in myself a lot too. I'm such a romantic person and have a lot of love to give, and, I truly think that they would have been together still if that was the case, but I also know that considering the circumstances and considering the fact that she did not wanna get the help that she needed, I'm glad that they separated, and I'm glad that they divorced. So, they divorced when I was only a couple years old. I think I was probably 2 or 3. This is all documentation that I've just seen in court files, to be honest with you. So, again, like, this is not really much of my own knowledge. It's me just reading documentation saying this happened, this happened, this happened. And then, like I said, I don't remember much of my childhood, to be completely honest, which is very common with
I
complex
relate.
PTSD.
Yeah.
And foreshadowing to the future. And I do have some memories of going to school in Florida. Like I said, in kindergarten and 1st grade, I remember being left behind at school, not being picked up, forgotten, neglected. I remember being dropped off at my mom's, which is my grandmother on her side, and she would be out partying with men, whatever, drinking. Her drinking developed into, an alcoholism, so she was addicted to alcohol, and it's just got worse and worse as time went on, and then it was just this kind of growing up was this custody. It was a combination of this custody battle with an alcoholic, abusive mother to my dad. I haven't shared too much of my dad. I do tend to kind of put him on a pedestal, but he did go to he was in the military, served in the Persian Gulf War, and has PTS, was a Golden Glove boxer in the military, and as a result to just being a lover of combat sports and being a boxer during that time, he ended up getting traumatic brain injury in his prefrontal cortex. So, traumatic brain injury, to people who don't know what that is, it basically just means a general trauma to the brain, but it can indicate anywhere. It could be anywhere. So, it could look so different. So, some people, it's in the back of the head, the side of the head. If you fell off a bike, you're going to have a different experience for TBI than other people. And so when you think about boxing and you're constantly being hit in the face, this is where your prefrontal cortex is. Fortunately, your prefrontal cortex controls your emotions, your decision making, also your vision. What else does it control? Ashraf, I'm trying to think.
So many, yeah, so many things. It's
A lot of
huge
mood.
powerhouse. Yeah.
A lot of mood-based things. It can change your personality. Is so I grew up with this very unique combination of 2 parents that were emotionally unstable, honestly, from 2 different spectrums, from 2 different sides. And one was, again, like, I think it was she had a bit growing up for my mom/also the pregnancy, and then also For my dad, it was all, like, environmental and obviously his PTSD from the war. So, there was quite a few things just toggling with that. I have a brother, an older brother, and we were very close, and we still are pretty close, but we were especially close growing up because that was all we had. And I think back and I think that that was honestly our true sense of stability was each other. And I think that that really united us. And I know that might look a little different for you as well, because I think of like age gap for us with our ages being so close to each other. I was really grateful that we had the chance to like be by our sides and protect each other and look out for each other. My brother was definitely the troublemaker, and I was the peacemaker and the perfectionist and kept everyone together. And I think that that was exacerbated as time went on and due to environmental circumstances. But over time, my dad gained custody of us. Like I said, for quite some time, we lived in Florida. That's when my mom had custody. And then he was able to fight for us for then having partial custody. And we would see over the summers and had some really not so, I hated the summertime. Hated summers. And even when we get into our pieces about travel, there's actually some like very negative emotions towards summertime when I was in college as well. So the summertime was never a pleasant moment for me because it meant that I had to see my mother, who obviously was not very kind to me and or my brother, who would, hit us and say things to us and call us nasty names and kick us out and
Mhm.
neglect us, whatever. But the other fold of that was because my dad was fighting for custody, it also meant that he was very poor. So we grew up in poverty, pretty severe poverty, and it was kind of weird. I'll give an example of something that I haven't quite like pinned what it means, but I think it's an interesting tie. So when my dad was with my mom when they were married, he was in the police force, and I can't remember, I think during this time he finished up the police academy and he was doing some like security, like almost like bodyguard stuff. But he was doing it for some pretty high profile names, which is awesome. I want to say it was Pat Summit. It's a Yes, Pat Summit, who's like used to be the women's basketball coach at UTK or something like that, and he was one of the bodyguards for Dolly Parton, which is so
Hey.
like the security guards for Dolly Parton, and it was just such a funny, like, his name was in the newspaper, and, like, he was just such a cool dude. But then when they were divorced and she went to Florida, he quit his job. She tried to file charges on him that were then on his record, which made it harder to find jobs, and next thing you know, he's working at Walmart. And, it was just such a wild turn of events that someone who started with this incredible career turned into, not to say that working at Walmart is bad, but when you started from somewhere else to then going down rather than the other way, it just it says a lot about the experience and what she did to actively hurt him and her own children too. And we were one of the people that received the free books from Dolly Parton's program. So it was just kind of crazy how he went from being a, like, bodyguard or security guard for Dolly Parton to then being a part of the low income Dolly Parton program. And I think that that was just such a wild situation, and it didn't change really growing up either. That pretty much stayed consistent. My first I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, my first bed was from a landfill. He worked in waste management, and they were free, and that's what we used. And, working my way up from there is such an impactful, so even now when I'm, sitting here in a one-bedroom apartment and I've told you all my crazy, like, "We have the HVAC broken, and we have this, and we have that." It reminds me that of where I've come from and how far I've made it, and how important it is to advocate and market yourself and work hard for yourself and your own success, that I think makes a difference. And I'm really proud of myself. And we've come a long way. So I think that's something that people don't often see when they first meet me. They don't suspect, that I grew up in that manner and kind of toggling like this mental health situation for my parents and navigating their emotions and all of this, and also growing up in poverty. And I've had to learn with Matt, my partner, my boyfriend that I've been with for 6 years, and learning what does financial success look like and seeing financial scarcity in myself very deeply. This kind of idea of being scared to invest, wanting to just save, constantly being stressed, and just trying to figure out what is. And I also, it's so fascinating the cycle that we get in low income too. That's something I've been really like kind of thought spiraling about is when you're in a low income bracket that you tend to like be stuck in that low income bracket. And I have thought really long and hard on how to get out of that cycle, but I also still see it in my own dad and some decision makings that he makes. For example, like there's a lot of like what's the word? Like spontaneous spending whenever money comes along, or if he just happens to like sell something and now he's got $100, he's like, "Oh man, I can spend this on blah blah blah." And it's like, "Wait, let's save it. Let's invest it. And it is just so interesting how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Just I don't know, and I've seen it firsthand as someone who's, in this middle class, slowly climbing and figuring that out and seeing the effects not only of, like I said, I guess, the abuse and the alcoholism and all of these things that have impacted me, but also the poverty. Like poverty is a form of trauma, a form of a way that we can heal. So, yeah, that's a very long-winded version of my history, and there's so much more.
So we're just scratching the surface. And I think the way that you articulated the impact that each of these areas of your life had on you, and how I think subconsciously it has caused you to lean into perfectionism and trying to overperform as a response to the lack of control maybe that you felt in your life growing up from all these different pillars of what were supposed to be pillars of stability
Mhm,
in your life, your mother, your father, and both of them having mental health issues that were largely untreated. It makes sense. It makes sense that you are who you are today, a very deeply compassionate, very empathetic, very self aware individual who has overcome a lot of self limiting beliefs. And we're always on the journey of healing. But I think, even to your point about cycles of poverty, this is exactly why financial education is so important, such a pillar of the Travel Through Trauma program, is because that's exactly the reason once
mhm,
you are in that bracket, the the systems at play are designed perfectly to keep people exactly where they're at and continue to ensure that we have more and more billionaires, which
mhm,
really, I mean, this is getting political, but should not exist
mhm.
on any level. So props to you for really paving your own path in spite of all those circumstances. I have to understand. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I will say, a couple things too. Want to clarify for the people listening is one thing I do really admire and respect is with my dad, he did get the medication that he needed and has like a neurologist and a psychiatrist that he meets with. And so that was really lovely to see, despite all the things that he struggled with, he always tried to be his best self and he always sought help. Now, there were times when we were younger that he couldn't afford the medication and he couldn't afford the doctors, unfortunately, but as we got older, he was able to get the help that he needed, so that was really good, and we had some family support, so I lived with my aunt for a couple years, and being able to live with some family members helped him to kinda save some of that money, to then afford the medication and things like that, so there was a nice, I don't know if I would say nice, but in a sense, kind of looking back, hindsight 2020, there is this nice parallel of someone who needed help and refused it versus someone who needed help and sought it out and continues to show progress and continues to listen and learn despite these things that he struggles with. And he knows it within himself, but he is humble enough to recognize that he needs help and that he needs to make change for his kids and for himself. Mostly, he's a very sacrificial guy, so he's just like, "I will do it for my kids," and I'm like, "But you also need to do it for yourself." But
Yeah.
that is one thing that I really admire and respect. The other thing, that stood out to me was my understanding of, I think, traveling as well, and this eye-opening opportunity that you don't need much to travel. And when you're talking about the financial support and mentorship that is being provided, there's also this kind of learning curve with traveling where it's like, "Oh, you actually don't need a lot." And I've heard so many people say like, "Oh, I wish I had enough money to do this. How do you always travel? How do you do this?" And I just say, "Honestly, I prioritize it, I save up for it, and I make it happen."
Exactly, exactly. Because if you're motivated enough, you will find a solution towards any goal that you set
Mhm.
your mind to. And I think when we prioritize not spending on fashion or the newest iPhone or whatever is trending, we will be able to have the financial ability to invest in ourselves in that way in our long-term future and being inspired by travel. And I definitely want to talk about travel as well. But I would also love to know, based on all these experiences that you had growing up and the instability of the people in your life and the financial security that you didn't experience, what
Mhm.
sorts of self-limiting beliefs did you begin to truly believe about yourself that you've had to spend the next many years unpacking and working on and maybe even continuing to work on?
Yeah. I have a note in my cabinet, the one behind me. This is my art cabinet, but it is my sacred space that no one touches. And I have a note in there that says, "Caitlin, you do not have to do things alone. You are not alone." And when I was growing up, I definitely had my personal narrative be that I am alone and I have to figure things out. And even when my dad was supporting us, oftentimes he didn't quite know how to support us. So, one of the big things he pushed my brother and I and really encouraged us was to get our education. And he was like, no matter what, get your education, get your education. He always said, education is your road to freedom because he didn't receive that education and he knew that education would give us like the financial security and the job security that we would have. Now, of course, nowadays things have changed and some people can do that without education, but from his knowledge back in the day, and honestly, I still kind of stand by it in some way or another, get your education, whether it be trade school, whether it be a 4-year degree, whether it be a PhD. I stand by the fact that educating yourself, reading books, learning, studying, having conversations create healthier, holistic, and empathetic human beings, whatever that form of education looks like. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. And the thing that he unfortunately couldn't do, he could give me all these values and these strong beliefs, but he himself was not a studious person. And I had to learn on my own. I had to study on my own. I remember getting to school hours early. I was best friends with my chem teacher. Yes, I was the nerd. Yes, I was bullied. Thank you very much.
Welcome to
But
the club.
but I would get there an hour, sometimes 2 hours early and just sit down with my professor, well, I guess teachers, and ask them questions and figure it out, and I didn't catch on to things really quickly. I did have to study, I did have to practice, I did have to do my very best, and even then sometimes end up with C's, and that's okay, but I did have to work for it, and I had to use my resources. I had to find other peers. Most of the time, it was other teachers or whoever, because also that was free and we couldn't pay for like tutors.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was the nanny that we could afford. Sometimes it was my aunt who was a second grade teacher. Now I'm in sixth grade and I'm asking her math questions. It was honestly whoever I could find that was in front of me. I took advantage of that. And I do think that that led to a level of hyper independence and a level like I still find myself constantly being overproductive, hyper independent, that perfectionist, that go-getter, always seeking for more, always reaching for more. And I do very much struggle with the silence and sitting in peace and sitting in calmness. That's really hard for me. And I think that those definitely shaped my narrative growing up was, feeling like I was alone, feeling like I had to do things all by myself, becoming hyper independent. I think it did. I will say there were some things where it allowed me to open my mind a bit. I was able to understand a variety of perspectives. I even had an interview once that was like, it was actually for Habitat, and they said, "Do you have experience dealing with difficult people?" And of course, I didn't say, growing up, but I was like, "Oh, I have definitely dealt with some difficult people, and I know how to handle those things." And I often have a lot of empathy too. A lot of people think when you've dealt with difficult people or you've dealt with this, and I've been in customer service as well. I've been, I mean, you name it all. My first job was working in an assembly line factory. Like, we've done the whole shebang. And I've had a variety of people come into my life. And I think the biggest thing is just understanding where they're coming from and seeing all different perspectives, understanding a lot of times it's not about you, a lot of times it's not personal, and there's always two sides to the coin. I never take what is openly said or displayed for what it is. So there's pros and
Exactly.
cons.
And I think even the hyper independence is a very powerful survival tool for a really long time as you are getting older and coming into adulthood. But there comes a point in our lives where that shifts, where it no longer serves us. It may create walls that keep people away from us, that prevent us from being able to receive love as deeply as we deserve it because we think maybe we're not deserving of it because we have to do everything on our own. Maybe we're not safe because we've learned if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, or that you have to figure it out by yourself. Okay, maybe things have to change now. Maybe the way that it has been working for me is not going to be the way that's going to continue working for me. And I've seen that in you. I think in my experience with you, you have become really good at asking those kinds of questions and inquiring about, where you need help and support from others in your life, whether it's me as your friend or your partner. I'm sure it's happened in many other instances that I don't have visibility to, but I have noticed that you're really good at advocating for yourself in that way, which is really, really important. And it shows like that you've already kind of come beyond that in a lot of ways, that self-limiting belief. Even the fact that you put that in your cupboard behind you, I think it's such a powerful reminder to visually see every day that you're not alone, that you are loved, that you're supported, that you don't have to go through the rest of your life by yourself.
Yeah, and I think, and I will say Matt is really helping me. My friends are really helping me break down those barriers because even, Matt has caught me a couple of times where I've just like when I'm cooking, I'm like doing things and I'm moving stuff around and I'm like also putting dishes away and I'm hand washing while I'm cooking and I'm taking out the trash and I'm like sweeping while the meat is browning and I'm like trying to do everything all. And he just looks at me and he says, "All you have to do is just ask." He's like, "You don't have to do it alone." And now we have like a system too where I'll just tap him and be like, "Hey, trash." And he's like, "Okay, cool." And then he grabs it, but he constantly reminds me, or when I finish cooking and I set the food down, he doesn't let me get back up. He says, "Nope, you're on the couch. I'll get the dessert. I'll put away the dishes. Whatever it is that I instantly my productive brain wants to stand up because I don't do well sitting down for long periods of time, that he's like, "No, you have to like unwind. And this is your time to sit and be still." And I think that's really powerful.
Wise guy.
I know. It's just people like that, when you surround yourself with people that are constantly trying to be better themselves, they also allow you to be better. And I think like when I'm surrounding myself with people like Matt, like you, like my strong community that I've worked so hard to be with, again, we're having these conversations of how we can be better every day for ourselves and for our community, our chosen family, right?
Exactly. And we become a reflection of the five closest people to us. So are you going to choose people who inspire you, who have traits that you want to adopt and learn from? Or are you going to choose people who are comfortable and familiar because they maybe reflect the parts of us that are hurt or the parts of us
Mhm.
that are used to being hurt? And I
Yeah.
think it's so important that we're extremely diligent with our communities and who we're surrounded by, because at the end of the day, you know,
Yeah.
that's really what we have to rely on as people who have experienced trauma and maybe don't have that level of comfort and ability to rely on our parents, maybe in the way that others had growing up.
Yeah. I think too, I know I've talked about this with you before as well, but when we talk about like the ACE score, there's also the resilience score. And I think even when I brought it up, you were like, "Oh, I didn't even know." Is that right? You hadn't known about.
Yeah, I've done the A score, but I hadn't done the resilience score. And I still don't think I have.
And or there's like a resilience test or something like that that ties with the ACE score, and it displays essentially based off of positive experiences, it indicates how likely you are to be resilient to those things. And I do think that being around other positive people and mentors did play a huge impact in my growth, or at least my willingness for growth, that allowed me to continue to be better and better for myself and for my chosen family every single day. I mean, I had someone even in college. I love sharing this story because it calls me out, but also is really important. It was I went to college, and it was the first time I was kind of out of the household, right? And it was quite a bit of an adjustment, and there were a lot of things like many people, there were a lot of things that when you're in your household bubble, you think is normal, but when you go out of that bubble, you realize, "Oh, that's not normal." And normally it's like quirky, funny things. You do your laundry a certain way, you cook this way, or you do your nighttime routine in a certain manner, whatever. But for me, and I'm sure there were some quirky things that I did as well, like that, but also there were things like my emotional responses. And I got tested for borderline, bipolar, and quite a variety of mood disorders because I thought that I had these things, but in reality, I tested I didn't have any of these, but it was a product of environmental circumstances and environmental influences. And so when I was in college, I was responding very deeply and very emotionally to things that I should not have been responding the way I was. And a friend of mine that was also one of my like dorm mates, whatever, said to me, "Hey, Caitlin, the way you're responding to things is not normal. I think you should go to therapy. How about I help you fill out the form and I'll go with you?" And I think that was probably one of the most powerful things and the best thing a friend could do for me was not the one that said, "Yeah, you're right. Totally right. You're always in the right." But it was the one who said, "Hey, girl, that's actually not normal, but we should get some help, and I'm going to walk you through it the whole way. And we're going to do it together."
The
Alone.
kind of compassionate care that we need as people
Mhm.
who are recovering from complex trauma and are
Mhm.
learning how to regulate our nervous systems. Like, that's
Yeah.
a perfect example of the type of community to surround yourself by, people who will see the hurt and love you through it and want to
Mm.
support you through it and not enable you. Big,
Yes.
big difference. Yeah,
And then a
because there's a
lot.
lot of enablers out there. Yeah,
And I think that's like that's kinda common, and I think that's the more socially acceptable thing is to, be accepting no matter what, but I think that there is a level of truth and humility and vulnerability when we can be in a space where we can make mistakes with our friends, and also we can walk through that difficulty together and lift each other up. I think there's so much power with that.
exactly. And those
Yeah.
are the kinds of friends that end up lasting for decades in your life because you continue to grow and you continue to support each other, even if you have different passions, different skills, different areas where you live. At the end of the day, that's the core value is that self-development and that growth that will
Mhm.
continue to allow these people to be in your life long term. I love that. And so when was it in your life that you began to notice this curiosity for travel? I know you had lived in different states, and I'm sure that, maybe you had a little bit of experience here and there, but you've gone international multiple times. And I find it really remarkable, especially given the way that you grew up and even the financial circumstances of your upbringing, that you have managed now to go on multiple international trips and by yourself. When did that start or how?
Yeah, honestly, so I as I guess, begin to just grow and learn and heal, I became open to new experiences. And in college, I did feel like I was able to explore and I just wanted to try all these things. And I loved it and I soaked it up. And I became really close with this one friend. But I will say, despite all this sounds really great, but I will say there were still a lot of things that I was healing and struggling with, and one of them was I actually was very codependent. I remember I was a very codependent friend, and that was a big struggle of mine. Despite my hyper independence, I would latch on to, like, a person, and I think it was because I had to be hyper independent and so, like, on top of things for most of my life that I needed, like, a safety net for someone. And this particular person in college that I became really close to was my, like, codependent person. This was, like, I went everywhere with her, and she was cool with it. But then she wanted to travel, and there was a study abroad through college, and I knew that there was no way my dad was gonna let me travel unless it was something like that, and so I was able to actually have some family support financially that opportunity, which was lovely. Wish it happened earlier on in my life, but, we appreciate things when they come.
Like the never.
Or better late than never. Later on in my life, had some family that was able to kind of provide additional financial support. That was obviously not covered with, like, my scholarships that I got in my college program, and I just wanted to go with her. It was just, like, not a great reason, but it's the truth. I wanted to go with her and I didn't wanna spend a semester without her. I also had a desire to try new things. The stars aligned, and I went with her. We went to Santiago in Chile, and that was not the place that I originally wanted to go. I was like, "Oh, if I wanna travel, I wanna go to Europe, because that's safe and not scary and whatever." And she wanted to go to Santiago, and I'm so glad because it completely wrecked my entire perception of humanity in such the best way. I am very impartial to the locations that are often overlooked because of that experience, and I remember I took Latin in high school because it was easier than Spanish to me. You didn't have to speak it. So I went to Santiago, Chile, lived there for 3 months, not knowing any Spanish except for, like, the generic words, and she knew significantly more, but I just took beginner Spanish and I soaked up so much. I learned, I made a fool of myself so many times. I messed up. Everyone laughed at my accent. Everyone laughed at all the mistakes I made, but I also saw so much joy and love and community and kindness, just such deep and rich, genuine kindness for people, random strangers. And it truly changed me, and I saw things that I never thought I would be able to see. I was able to hike Patagonia, and I was able to sandboard down sand dunes. I've never been snowboarding in my life, but I've never been snowboarding, but I've been sandboarding. Like, what? This is so weird, and it was just, like, such a magical moment. It was a growing moment. I had some of the hardest times internally during that travel. I was really confronted with my trauma, with my mistakes, with my everything, honestly. My good, the bad, the ugly, I was confronted with it all because there was nothing to escape. There was nowhere to go except my present moment, and
Exactly.
I think that that was such an impactful moment, and I went through so many highs and so many lows that when I came back, I wanted more because I liked who
Got
I
the
was.
trap bug.
I got the travel bug and I liked who I was when I came out of it. I said, "You know what? I am a better person for putting myself in uncomfortable situations and facing my weaknesses and my strengths head on." And I became more aware of myself just a tiny, tiny bit. And each time that I left, I became more and more aware of myself. I think I grow more in that time of travel than I do just going through the routine of work, come home, etcetera.
Exactly, and that is, again, such a testament to the power of that pillar of, like, the Travel Through Trauma program. It's exactly designed for that. That's exactly what we want for people. It's being able to confront yourself because you can't escape what you haven't processed, and
Mhm,
so whatever baggage you are carrying throughout your life subconsciously is going to rise to your consciousness when you are so uncomfortable in a foreign place where you don't have any of the noise that you normally want to distract yourself with, whether it's the people, the places that you normally go to find reprieve from whatever it is that you're escaping, whether it's the loneliness or the fear or the voices in our head that are self loathing or belittling to us. I think it's
mm.
really, really beautiful that you had that 3-month experience that was initially a response to codependency. And the irony of it is, you came back maybe even 5% less codependent because of that result. Like, go figure.
I made friends with so much more or, like, so many more people in that community, and it was really nice. It was a great little starting point for me because I still had the safety net of, like, it being within a university and within the school and, like, teachers and things. The following summer, I went back and traveled by myself to Buenos Aires in Argentina, and
And Brazil, right?
just Argentina. I went
Okay, for some reason, I thought it was both. Okay.
to, Uruguay for a little bit too, but that was just, like, visiting. I wasn't, like, living there, for a long time, but the following summer, I lived in Argentina for 2 months, and that was because of escapism. So, yet again, not a great reason, but it got me out. I've told you many times before as well, when I was studying abroad, that was spring of 2018, and then the summer of 2018 was probably one of the hardest things I've ever experienced in my life, which was when I became my a primary caregiver to my mom. So imagine being the sole responsible human to a mother who abused. And it was just a crazy time. And I would not recommend. I was in school, I was working, and I was every day on the phone convincing my mother to stay in rehab and having to leave class to hop on the phone because obviously it's a voluntary thing, and trying to get her to stay and taking her. She got into a car accident and she was drinking and she got into a car accident, thankfully did not hurt anyone, but she ran into a ditch, totaled her car and fractured her entire collarbone, or like at least one side of her collarbone, and completely broke and fractured her, or like shattered her ankle. And she did not believe in doctors, and so they said that she needed surgery, and she said, "No, doctors don't know anything," even though they have full degrees.
So
So
it's like walked around with a broken foot and a broken collarbone?
she wheeled out with a broken foot and a broken collarbone, and then I wheeled her back to her house, and then I wheeled her around for 2, 3 months over the summer, and then I wheeled her to the toilet, and I carried her to the toilet, and I did all the things of a mother who was then not only mentally unstable, but now disabled physically, and that was just a crazy turn of events while also still being, of course, an alcoholic and abusive. So choosing every day to show up to her house and take care of her and manage her finances and manage her and make sure that she, to be frank, doesn't shit herself. And while also choosing to love her and take care of her house and all the and her 17 animals, not really 17. She had like 2 dogs and like 3 cats, but like kind of a lot.
Yeah.
But there were also, with borderline, there are good moments, and so, there were times when we would be out on the patio and painting our nails and having good times, and it wasn't all bad, of course. There's always she was actually a really lovely mother. She was fantastic, and that almost makes it a bit sadder because she could have been such a great mom, and I had the great memories that I did have with her were phenomenal. She was a fantastic cook, and I loved cooking with her. She was the best gift giver. She knew me really well. She was an artist. She was the only artist in my family. So we created and made things together. And I think I've told you before too, I actually avoided art for quite some time because I avoided everything reminding me of her. And I did everything in my power to try to not be like her. But then I realized that art was part of my soul, and there are lovely things about her that I can appreciate and love without being her, And when I think about cooking, I do think about her, and I think about how great of a cook she was and how she used to make things from scratch. And I think to myself, I want to do that. The parts that I did appreciate about her, I do want to take with me and carry in my heart and soul. And allow that love and nurturing side to continue for, like, my future generations. So, I will say that that was good. Overall, it was a very traumatic time in one of my, it's taken me some time to kind of share this, but one of the, I guess, 2 hardest things over that summer was one of them was opening the door and her not even knowing her own daughter, and that was really difficult, especially after I had spent so much time caring for her and, her wheeling herself to the door and opening it up and saying, "Who are you?" And me having to sit there and say, "It's Caitlin, it's your own daughter," was heartbreaking, is really the best way I can describe it. The other incident that really tore me apart was I witnessed her trying to kill herself, and that was also a very difficult time in my life, all within that summer. So you can see why that particular summer was one that I never wanted to repeat ever again, and why the following summer was escapism.
Understandable. I mean, who wouldn't want to? And I don't think escapism is inherently unhealthy. I think it's a very healthy way to channel your desire to feel something different than what you've been
Mhm.
experiencing. And it's better
Yeah,
to have escapism through travel than maybe through other avenues like drugs or alcohol, which is another very valid form of escapism for a
that's
lot
so
of people. Yeah.
yeah, and I think, yeah, I wanted to make sure that I didn't resort to other things, and there was another point in my life where I got into boxing, and that was my way of escapism in a sense. It was my way of processing a lot of emotions, coming back from Argentina, 'cause I wanted to make sure that I had every reason, like, I was geologically not able to help or be in vicinity of being held responsible, and I wanted to make sure of that. So I, like I said, went off and lived in a different country for a couple months, and I also now geologically cannot be held responsible for these things.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of it. Of course, during that summer, I was on my own, didn't have a safety net, and learned so, so much. And that was a really growing time and learned a lot about my identity and who I was.
A lot of that was like reflected through how you were able to kind of see the nuance with your mom, being able to
Mhm.
see the good traits that she does have that you see within yourself. And
Mm.
So much of our self acceptance comes from accepting and forgiving those who we see ourselves in, who have hurt us. Because I know, like, I can speak for myself. I have a lot of traits similar to my mom and dad. And I used to hate that about myself, even the way I looked, because I look so much like my mom, even in the pictures of us like around the same age or strikingly similar. But the more I've become accepting and forgiving of who she is and why she operates the way she does and the traits that we have in common, the more I've been able to like accept that about myself and even come to love those traits about myself, want to carry it forward in my own way. And I think that's exactly what you're doing too in your love of art and your love of cooking and even like your love of boxing being very much a reflection of your dad and a lot of his, interests before his brain injury. And I think it's really beautiful that you're kind of creating your own relationship to these things that are maybe part of your history and genetics.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting to like, boxing, that was my way of like, I need to do something. I need to essentially get this energy out and I need a way to process these emotions and these feelings. And I don't want to go down the path that like my dad or my mom or whoever has taken. And so I'm going to do that through physical exercise. And that's actually where I met my boyfriend that I've been with for 6 years now. And it's just so interesting. Oh, and one of the things that I think is really powerful, I don't box as much anymore, but I find this kind of resonate through whatever sport it might be. My boxing trainer, Ben, he was very much trying to set me up with Matt, which was hilarious.
That's
And sure
sweet.
enough, it worked and he was right. We were a good match. But one of the best things that Ben Chang did teach me was breath work. And you don't think about that much when boxing, but I think it really changed my understanding of processing emotions and it allowed like when you are like think about when you're angry, right? And if you like so many people were like you must really like boxing must really help you get your anger out. I'm like, actually no. It's kind of the opposite because when you're so angry and you are so in this like emotional state, you're actually out of breath. You can't control your breath and you lose it very quickly and you become tired and gassed out so fast, right? But with boxing, it's all about endurance. And so what Ben Chang taught me was when you control your breath, you can control everything else around you. When you control your breath, you can control your power, you can control your balance, you can control your strategy, your technique, you can control everything else. And I thought that was so beautiful because oftentimes we think about breath work for yoga or slower paced things, but I do think that there is so much strength in this level of discipline and breath work for higher impact sports. And it kind of brings you back into your body and you are literally forced to focus on your breath because you have no other choice. And that was exactly what I needed. And I'm sure for many other people. And I think a lot of like people who get into high intensity sports or even combat sports, that sense of like understanding, I think really resonates with them that maybe slower paced things don't quite resonate. And I know that may be a little uncommon as like a woman, but for me growing up in a little bit more kind of high intensity militarist what am I trying military or militaristic environment where my dad was very like he was constantly doing combat sports again like he was in karate, he was in a few different martial arts and football and then boxing and then krav and it was just he craved those things and people think that when athletes want to participate in that stuff that it's because they're these like aggressive and angry and testosterone is just raging through their veins and I actually think that's not the case at all. It's a sense of control and it's a sense of breath work and it's their way of finding peace and being connected with their body in a very different way but it's really all the same so
That's some serious wisdom. I think it's really powerful to know how to utilize your physical fitness and utilize your physical health to really help you gain the skills to calm yourself, to know that you have authority over your mind and your body, and that even when things come up, now you've built this like muscle memory around breath being this grounding source of energy for you, where you don't have to panic about something anymore because you know the power of breath. And you know how it feels in your body to breathe deeply and breathe into your muscles and breathe into expanding your endurance. This is really, really wise stuff. What would you say for somebody who has experienced a lot of the complex PTSD and poverty and self limiting beliefs and a lot of things that you've experienced? What would you say to help them take the next step in their healing journey, given every tool that you've utilized and learned over the years from your physical to the mental, the emotional, the travel?
Gosh, I don't think there's really one right answer, but I think the biggest thing was facing the uncomfortable head on and putting myself in uncomfortable situations. When I think about, again, going back to travel, I chose the uncomfortable. I chose to try salsa dancing and fail. I
Mm.
chose try to speak Spanish and fail. I chose to try some random food that I had no idea what was it going inside my mouth and fail. And maybe I liked it and maybe I didn't. I chose to have conversations with people and connect. I chose to talk to a rando on the street. Those things are gonna allow you to learn and grow. And I think not only face those head on, but give yourself grace and be okay to make mistakes. And I know that's easier said than done. Even when I would beat myself up in the moment and say, oh man, I wish I did this. And I can't believe I did that. That was so embarrassing. Or I messed up. I was not a good friend. Or I didn't say the right thing. Or this came out wrong, whatever it was down the road, I was still able to give myself grace and reflect and learn. I think that constant state of growth, this growth mindset, allows us to be better people and allows us to get out of that complex PTSD. And I recently got tested and I am no longer in the complex PTSD category. So
It can be done, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here first. It can be done.
it can.
Discomfort is growth.
And it takes being uncomfortable and it takes also friends that hold you accountable. And I think
Yeah.
that it takes the ability, every single time I traveled, whether it was with people or by myself, I learned so much. I made mistakes. When I was with friends, sometimes I wasn't a good friend and I messed up. And I have to, and some of them were still not friends. And I have to come to terms that I wasn't a good friend in that moment or I didn't respond the way I should have. And that's part of the process. And people are going to come and go, and you are going to be part of the story, or you may not be a part of your story. And of course, like I regret those things, but I also know that I learned so much out of myself. Like I learned that there were certain things that were trauma responses, or I learned certain things were a form of overstimulation, or I learned that tells me that I really struggle with trusting, or that tells me that I maybe am being more defensive in this way. And maybe I need to explore that. What does it mean when I become defensive? What does it mean when I act this way? How can I do better? How can I still be true to myself, but also be a good friend, but also be a better version of me? That every step of the way has challenged me. And I know you know this about me, but I try to travel every year. And so I save up and I can just kind of tell like this has worked for me. I mean, it's not going to look the same for everyone, but my like general standard that I try to save up for is 2000. So if I can save up, a couple hundred a month, then I can get up to 2000 to spend on the trip. And that includes like the airfare, the place to stay, the excursions, whatever. But I will say
Food.
food, I mean, that's the all inclusive package. And that's pretty cheap, I will say, depending on where you're traveling, especially international. But Actually, I don't know. I spent more flying out to California. I will say that. I spent more flying out to California than I did going to Ireland.
Yep,
Crazy.
exactly. Yeah.
So
Even the
it just
flight is,
depends.
less expensive than going internationally than it is going domestically, which is crazy.
Insane,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So it really just depends, but that is my limit, and it forces you to ask the question of what's worth it and what experiences are valuable to you. Recently, I was in Mexico and I chose to go on a hot air balloon ride, and I was like, when in my when in my life would I be able to experience that? And it showed how much, like, even just spending a little bit of money on an experience means more than to me than spending it on a t-shirt
yeah,
or a material thing, you know what I mean? And
exactly.
that was a really powerful moment. I think it allows you to be intentional with what you spend. It also maybe allowed, maybe forced me to live in hostels and to be a little uncomfortable and to meet a lot of really freaking cool people that I am still
Exactly.
friends with today and I absolutely adore. And there's actually some really nice hostels, so people can't judge.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think there's a huge misconception around hostels in general.
Yes.
I would say the worst hostels are actually in the United States that I've
Yep.
experienced, but internationally, they're very nice, very well equipped, pretty clean.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and even the ones that, we may not consider to be well equipped or whatever, like, I've had some that are a little more rural or a little more out there. I think it forced me to be present and to remove myself from the conveniences of the US, because what were maybe not as well equipped were very well equipped within their country or, and
exactly.
yeah, so I think that it did allow me to kind of place myself back into that, like, impoverished state and remind me of my upbringing and also, like, allow me to be reminded of where I came from and that it's okay whether you came from that or not, it's okay to be a little uncomfortable, again, to face head on that uncomfortability and to challenge yourself, and to also like, there are times where I'm like, "If I can just get through these couple days, and then I'll be able to go to a nicer place." That's okay too. Like, we
Exactly.
don't have to, like, suffer and, like, you know, live in the pits and whatever, it's a balance, but
And it increases your resilience for life, and I think it's a great growing opportunity. Man, it's amazing to hear just all the different growth and opportunities that you've given yourself
yeah,
because you've truly chosen to prioritize you, and you've
mm,
chosen to prioritize the discomfort when that can be so scary for anybody else, especially somebody who has come from a lot of instability. Maybe all they crave is stability. But
mm,
perhaps when we go a layer deeper, we realize that we have to build that stability and that source of home within ourselves, first and foremost. And the way to get there is to push ourselves a little bit, to step
yeah,
into the unknown and realize what we're really capable of. And you're really, really a testament to what that looks like in human form. So thank you so much for sharing. We could talk all day, every day, and I would love to have you on this again because I just feel like there's so much deeper we can go and talk about even more variety of like different types of lessons we've learned through travel experiences, so many travel stories to share. But thank you
yeah.
so much for doing this. And if somebody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, my art Instagram is the at visual dot vitality. I love that term because I think that it just so deeply expresses, like, what I live by is, like, my art and my way of being is this sense of vitality, and
Mm,
I think and then, of course, being a visual artist, so, again, it's at visual dot vitality. That's my art one, and I am still learning and growing with my art and all the things, but if you want to follow along, sure. But honestly, if I could truly, like, if I could just, like, leave with one message is if you're ever unsure of something, just do the damn thing, and, like, if all else fails, just do the damn thing, and be
exactly.
okay to laugh at yourself and have that growth mindset. So that's the more academic.
Yeah.
the growth mindset,
I
but
love
my less academic one is just do the damn thing.
love it. I love it. What a way to end. Thank you. Let me